Hi, this is Terry from Marie Soapworks. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this soap. It's called Cosmic Wave Swirl. Let's get started. First, I'm measuring my water, and I froze some distilled water, and I use this for most of my water, and then I add a little extra to just top it off. And this helps with the fumes, and it also helps it cool off more quickly. And I just measured some powdered sugar into the water, and that was at a rate of 1 teaspoon per pound of oils. And doing that helps the batter stay fluid longer. I used a mini mixer to dissolve it completely before I add my lye to the water. Here I'm measuring my sodium lactate. Sodium lactate is a natural ingredient, and it's used to make the soap harder, and also it releases easier from the mold, and I use it at a rate of 1 teaspoon per pound of oils. Next, I'm adding my sodium hydroxide to my water and sugar mixture, and I just stir it until it's dissolved. After that, I set the pitcher and the sodium lactate aside in a safe place that's well ventilated. And next I measure my coconut oil and get that melting while I start my colorants. I melt it in the microwave at 30-second intervals, and I stir in between, and then I melt it till it's just barely melted. Okay, now I'm preparing my colorants. First is smooth coconut carbon, or also called activated charcoal. And I just use a little bit of olive oil to wet it, and then I scoop it into my container. This one can be stirred into your batter because it incorporates really easily, but I just like to do it this way. Our next colorant is natural indigo powder, and this makes a gray color in the batter. And this does clump a little bit, so it's one that you need to pay a little more attention and get the clumps out. Next we have medium red Brazilian kaolin clay. One of my followers told me that I was pronouncing it the wrong way. I was saying kaolin clay, and she said it's a Chinese word and that the K-A-O is pronounced like cow in cacao, and the last part is pronounced lin, so it's kaolin clay. Next we have black tea fragrance oil. It's a well-behaved fragrance, so it works beautifully for this kind of swirl. And remember, we also used the sugar in the water to help the batter stay fluid longer. Now that our coconut oil is melted, we add the castor oil very carefully, and then we add the olive oil very carefully. I have each of these oils in a squeeze bottle, and I measure almost up to the number that I need, and then I add the oil from the squeeze bottle to top it off, and that way I won't go over when I'm measuring directly into the coconut oil. Next, I add my fragrance to my oil combination. I wouldn't do this if the fragrance accelerates, but this one is known to behave, so this is a good time to add it. Now that the lye solution has cooled, I add the sodium lactate and stir it in, and then I strain my lye solution into my oils when the temperatures of each of those reach between 85 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit. In this case, my temperature was less than that. It was 78 degrees. And I'm doing a lower temperature because I'm using a slab mold. And last time when I used a slab mold, I decided I was going to soap a little bit cooler to try to avoid soda ash. I stick blended till emulsion is reached. Emulsion is just when all of the oils are just combined with the lye mixture and no oils are floating on the top. Here I'm dividing 5 ounces of batter into each of these 4 cups. And then I just added as much batter as I can to one of my funnel pitchers. Now I just add the colors. For my titanium dioxide, I already diluted that at a rate of 1 part titanium dioxide to 3 parts of olive oil. And I added 2 teaspoons of that mixture to my cup. Okay, now I'm getting my mold in place, and this is a 9-bar slab mold. It's just a homemade mold. And I need my batter to be at light trace, definitely more than emulsion though. You don't want it to be watery for this. And so I was having to stir my batter, and I used the mini mixer to try to get it to accelerate just slightly because it needed to be more thick than it was. It was a little watery and still an emulsion. So you have your base batter in the funnel pitcher, and you want your other batters to float on the top of that, and using those cups did not work because I couldn't pour that low, so it broke the surface, and you want it to float on top. So I had to transfer all of my batter that was in cups into the funnel pitchers. And you just pour stripes of batter in the pitcher on top of the base batter. Now when you pour it in the mold, you try to get it as close to the surface as possible. And I found out that this batter was a little too thin. It didn't work quite as I wanted it to at first. Also, it works a little better when you pull it close to you instead of away from you. You pull it toward you and you get the nice designs. I made this extension for my funnel pitcher from a handle of a milk jug, and so that helps me to get a little closer to the surface of the batter that's in the slab mold. And then when you run out of a colorful top, you just add more to the top. And you just keep going until you're out of batter. Notice as I'm pouring the orange in the pitcher as it goes out, how it's thick, and that is because I use clay as the colorant, and I would not suggest to do that when you're doing swirls. I didn't learn my lesson last time because I used clay then and I said I shouldn't use it, but yeah, I used it before when I did this design and it worked fine, so I thought I would use it again, but if I had to do it over, I would just use an orange colorant if I wanted to get that color. At this point, I put my mold on a Lazy Susan, and it helped much more when I needed to turn my molds. Because I had my hand on that extension, I couldn't turn the mold with my left hand. And then at one point I had my daughter come in and had her swivel the mold while I used the extension and filled up the center a little better because it was hard to get to the center. Once I was done with this, I added a post to the top, and then I covered it with plastic wrap, and I put it in my oven that was preheated at 170 degrees. And then when I put this in the oven, I turned the oven off and just left the light on, and I left that on overnight, and it seemed to work pretty well. This is the way I divide my slab. I use a ruler, and I put one end on the 0 and the other end on a number divisible by 3, and I divide that number by 3. So in this case I used a 9 and I divided by 3, and then I mark every 3 so it makes it equally divided. When I cut slabs, if I use a knife, often it will tear at the bottom, and this is a way of doing it without tearing. I use my wire cutter, and my husband made me up this guide. The top of this soap does need planed, but if I would have used a planer, I think the top would have just smeared and it would have been very frustrating. And a while ago, my husband made me this guide that's set up to the thickness of a bar, and if I need to make the bar shorter, I just slide a little piece of cardboard under there just to adjust the height. Now, since I'm just cleaning the bars, I'm going to tell you about what I learned from this batch. The first thing I learned is that the cups didn't work well at all. I couldn't pour close to the surface with the cups being that full, so I should have started with funnel pitchers from the beginning. The next thing I learned is, even with funnel pitchers, with the long spout, if you fill those too full, you can't dump them over as much, so you still can't get close to the surface. So what I would have done differently is I would have only filled that pitcher halfway up to start with, and then I would have put the colors on top of that, and I would have been able to tip it over more and get closer to the surface without adding that extension. The next thing I learned is that I started pouring the batter too soon. The batter was just a little too thin, and when I poured it, it was just a little muddy. And as I went along, it got a little thicker and the lines became more defined between the colors. It is a hard thing to know when to start pouring because At the other end, when you're finishing up, you don't want your batter to be too thick, so a lot of times you start pouring when it's a little too thin, just to be safe that it doesn't end up too thick. So it's a fine line, it's very hard to judge, and you just kind of get a feel for it after a while. The next thing I learned is that the design works best when you pull the pitcher toward you as you're pouring. And the slower you move it, the bigger your lines are. And the faster, of course, the thinner the lines are. And I realized that when my batter was at the proper consistency, that when I poured about 3/4 of an inch above the surface, that seemed to be a good height to pour. And I just want to let you all know that I am guest teaching an Amy Warden Soap Challenge in the month of July 2019. And if you want to get a notification, you can go on the Soap Challenge Club website and sign up for email notifications to let you know when to join the challenge. I'm teaching this technique. It's called pointy layers, and there's going to be 2 categories. Elements Bath & Body is going to be sponsoring the prizes for the July challenge, and they have a new colorant calculator. As part of the tutorial, I'm going to be showing how to use that. Thank you for joining me, and please subscribe, and if you'd like to receive notifications for the next video I post, just hit the bell. And thank you for watching, and have a great day.